I'm currently working in the banking with a banking industry client, and so we definitely do a lot of reconciliation on that level. Hopefully by the end of this it'll give you a little bit more insight on what to expect on the upcoming functionality. So about Alir, Alir is an industry leader in ERP workstations. We have over 150 Treasury Workstation implementations since 2005. Our consultants are experienced and based with 20 years plus of finance and treasury experience. Our partners maintain direct relationships with Oracle Treasury developers, which makes it instrumental in developing and increasing a better product in the future. Alir has been published as a leader in treasury and financial planning analysis space, and since 2007 we've been Swift Ready as a consulting partner. A little bit about Alir. 2005, we're celebrating 11 years of our business. Basically what we kind of do is help our clients succeed in partnering with efficiently implementing and integrating your software that you may have purchased in the past or plan to in the future. We also provide strategic guidance in allowing you to find the best way to, or best practice to implement or improve your current product that you may own, and then also unlock the potential of your software investments that you may not know. We have a deep core commitment to excellence and quality, which we kind of strive on. And our relevant practice areas in ERP services, advanced technology services, TMS services, and then strategic advisory service and end user adoption, change enablement. So even any one of those areas is specific to you, and you should reach out and definitely ask a lot of questions about your area and what you need to do to take the next steps forward. Some of the clients that we've dealt with or are currently in contract with, it's quite a spread of diversity of all kinds of industries, ranging from the government to retail and banking, automotive, and so definitely if you look at from the experience of what we bring to the table, you can get a wide range of what parts of reconciliation would best fit your company or your current process that you have. So current state reconciliation. Basically, in current state reconciliation, you kind of have your four basic pillars of reconciliation, which is your auto recon, which you're very familiar with, where you're getting your system side transactions up against your bank transaction. The automatic reconciliation exceptions, which is kind of an area where you're building your rules, which then will pick up any items that maybe you found outside the system, say fees from the bank or just an external system generating transactions that's actually hitting your bank accounts. Then we have forced reconciliation, which is part of where you can't find a fit to force the reconciliation, and semi-manual, where you're actually going out and looking for those transactions to then compare to your system side transactions to the bank transactions. So part of that is how does this all fit together, and what is basically, what will PUM18 give you to allow you to kind of go outside of this framework, or hardened framework, if you will, that PeopleSoft has been offering for several years. So the common reconciliations with pre-image 18. There's no capability to reconcile many-to-one, one-to-many, or many-to-many, one-to-many, and many-to-one. The delivered reconciliation rules are rigid and hard to modify. If you've ever tried to customize a Recon rule, you all know how difficult it can be to get it to work properly 100% of the time. The detractor is that these Recon rule development technical changes, it does usually require development effort, which is quite costly. The Recon tolerances were located inside the external account page. A lot of users don't have access to the external account page to go in and modify your Recon tolerances, as well as they're kind of buried in there as far as access to it. So the other issue with that, it was the single template design limits accounting functionality. And so the last part is no capability to do same-day reconciliation. Many customers will benefit from having real-time access to reconcile current-day systems, the transactions to the bank transactions. Those are really kind of the four areas where pre-18 image reconciliation had the biggest impacts or gaps in your current day-to-day reconciliation process. Continuing on with the pre-image issues, bank statement accounting match and match pattern rules are very limited and was somewhat inconsistent when using reconciliation, as we know that a lot of times patterns and values are very similar when it comes to transactional values, especially when you have quite a bit of transactions. The rules can sometimes pick up other, misplace or recognize other values that are not really intended for that rule. Another one was the same dollar amount, ref ID, duplicate match when breaking payments that were over $999,000, and it was payment would be truncated, so you would end up with more than one amount of payments, and then you'd have the same ref ID, which then would give you this inconsistent matching in the scenario where the amounts would be the same process. It's just a duplicate match in that case. The ability to reconcile one ACH transaction on the bank statement to many payments in the AP or Treasury is a huge issue, and the ability to reconcile a specific inbound ACH or wire to create an external transaction and get the correct accounting. Bank statement accounting is supposed to fix this, but many of the customers need to add the detailed and end up doing a lot of this manually. Basically, you're going in there and you're modifying how it loads the bank statement, or you're trying to add some into it so your process could run or pick it up more efficiently. And in the end, it becomes a little bit more manual on the user end, because they're having to go in and clean it up and look for where the errors are why the errors are being caused. So the future state of reconciliation, or version 9, Home 18 Enhanced Bank Reconciliation. So what is the future of bank reconciliation, image 18? So really the overview, we'll go a little bit over about what's being offered, parsing the bank statement, leveraging financial gateway security and bank reconciliation, ManytoOne reconciliations, and then the new modified pages in image 18, and then the technical impact that the image 18 will have on your table structure and some of the functionality that you currently may be using in your reconciliation. So the overview is enhanced support for the automatic bank reconciliation process and its pages. Application engine programs were impacted. Message catalog entries are created. People code have been added to the image 18. So there's quite a significant amount of work that went into improving the reconciliation area, and we'll go through that as we go through the impacts in the very bottom of the slide deck here. With the new configuration around Recon Rules, the users can reconcile multiple transaction lines to multiple bank statement lines, and reconcile transaction bank statement lines and using the parsed identidata or the new parsed identidata, and basically it's kind of a mapping procedure that's being done, and we'll go over that in the future slide here too. Last is the expanded bank reconciliation process to help modify or help the reconciliation process maximize the match rates and then minimize your manual recon exceptions or forced exceptions for forced reconciliation. And then last was to reduce that, having you as a user to go and have to modify the recon rules that you set up. If you're familiar with the external accounts page, there's a tab in there where you have to line up your recon rules and a lot of modifications. Most people have made modifications there to help improve the reconciliation process for out of the box, or things that the functionality would not cover. So, the parsing continue on that. The parsing and data configuration is supported through the enhancements of the data export-import utility. It provides new transformation rules, and it allows you to define how you'll transform these values. And it takes matching patterns to replace in the output and concatenation fields into one string, which extracts the substring among others. So basically it's taking these values and allowing you to concatenate values and also map those using the mapping procedure, which would allow you to take one value and then and change it to another. Say from I want to map A to 1, I could do that. Next is capability around leveraging the security functionality and Gateway for bank reconciliation. There's been some changes within Gateway and how items are viewed from the reconciliation process. And then the bank account pages, they've been added to limit access to the bank data. So they basically remove the reconciliation rules from the external accounts. It's no longer located in that area. You'd have to actually has its own navigation and page, so you wouldn't find that in there in that release. And then in subsequent sections, more in-depth overview of the new functionality and how or what pages and tables have been modified and what you think you would be impacted by in your current version that you're running for PeopleSoft. So we're going to parsing the bank statement addenda. So parsing bank statement addenda, as we know, we get the bank statements, we import them in, they come in the format that BI2s or Swift, and you have all this information, and your addenda field is compiled of commas, alphanumeric values. Some of them make sense, some of them do not. And this data is really what assists us in trying to do our reconciliation process and procedures. And the issue is that because of the variability and the inconsistencies across banking partners, as we know, nobody gives us the same information from these banks, and our relationship with that bank and whether or not they even want to change some of the values to even help you out to continue or to at least improve your reconciliation process. And it's very hard to get them to change. So I think part of what the vision was here is to make this process a little bit more malleable in order to corral or encompass the variable or the inconsistency of the data addenda that you're going to get in your bank statement. So part of how the bank statement addenda works is there's a data export and import utility. This provides a functionality to break down the unstructured addenda data into component parts. And then it's going to store that format. And so what the bank reconciliation rules can be doing is configure to use those parsed addenda data pieces to better reconcile. So basically you're kind of selecting or slicing and dicing the data that you want your reconciliation process to hand pick out in order to pinpoint or at least maximize your ability or your reconciliation hits and minimize the number of exceptions to a more manageable amount where 1 to 2 a day versus 20 or 30. So part of that from the bank statement addenda parsing is based on the PeopleTools document technology and the data export and import utility DEIU, which we'll reference quite a bit in the next few slides. And this is really the tools that allow for the transformation through an online mapping component. And if you see the navigation off to the side, you can see the map IDs that are used to create or to start your mapping. And basically you're coming in here like you traditionally do, you create your map definition, and you're going to build out your mapping tool. So if you're looking at your bank recon, and you can kind of see it here, bank recon, prior day map, and what's in the parse previous day statement, and then you have a version 2, which I believe that was maybe me, and then you have your current day statement map, addenda parsing current day statements. So you can basically split out, silo out your parsing abilities to be unique to either your prior day or your current day statements. So the parse bank statement process flow. So really PeopleSoft provides the steps delivered to set up bank statement addenda parsing. So you map the parsed addenda values to the defined value for each of the reference of the predefined codes. So you have your predefined code map group, on the code mappings page. And if you're familiar with BI2 and sometimes how you want to map a certain, say, ACH number to a different number so it will reconcile better, that's really what it's doing. You're mapping values in order to translate that to another value. 2 is identifying PeopleSoft documents for both the source targets, and that's bank statement parse and your bank addenda table. And then it's the review of the DIU document relationship, the validation of the map definitions and your statement transformations, and then the assigning of the map definitions by bank or bank accounts. And that's really key because this way you're not identifying one map definition and it applies to every single bank, because we know that all banks are different in how they do business and how they send us the information. So that's critical into basically customizing your mapping definitions by bank. So if it's a very small bank that kind of has a unique numbering or state data that they use, that'll give you the ability to kind of separate that out from a Chase or Wells Fargo. Last is the addenda. Last is the addenda transformation from an unstructured format to a target format, and it's supported both by prior and current day. So that was what I was talking about before, which is it's mapping this to a prior day statement and then also to your current day statement. So really allowing you to look at that data truncated separately from each other and building your mapping rules uniquely to whether you're a heavy user of same day or a heavy user of prior day, depending on your business structure and your reconciliation. Okay. So source document from your prior day bank statement, and then you have your bank addenda table from your previous day bank statement. And really what's going to do is go to the second level, which is your DEIU, or data export import utility, and it's using the bank recon prior day mapping that you built, and it's going to assign an addenda parse ID. And so that's really where the data starts to become itemized and put by ID. So in order for you to run your reconciliation, it's going to allow you to have these code mappings set in the table to then be used by the statement addenda parsing procedure, which is the Bank Recon Edition program. And so from that, it identifies that documents, and you have you're running your Bank Recon Edition program to call the data export import utility. And that's basically grabbing your bank statement that you imported, that you've been doing so far, and then basically putting it up here in the map engine and taking all of that information, taking your mapping and your rules, and then applying it to the bank addenda table from your previous day addenda table. So in the third, or like the last three parts, is you review that DIU document relationship, which is here. And then you validate that map definition for the statement. And then you assign the map definitions, as I was saying before, by bank or bank account. I think the bank account got off there. Yeah. So how do the map IDs work? So you have the transformation from unstructured format to the structured target format supported for both prior and current day bank statements. And really the map IDs follows here is the bank recon prior day map, and then your same day map. So familiar with that list I showed you in the mapping where you were building your map IDs, you can create a prior day or current day, same day. Or you can create a custom mapping that you use that maybe is an ad hoc or a card or whatever it may fit for your current reconciliation process. This is not limited to just bank activity, but it could be anything that your bank's sending you from investment. So using the code mapping page here, so we're kind of getting into what does the page look like when you're trying to assemble the code mapping, and this is for TR code mapping. Define the mapping between external bank codes and their equivalent internal PeopleSoft code for both bank statement and bank statement processing. In this case here, we have our code mapping, which is addenda. It says replace parse addenda value, and its mapping name is Recon Ref ID number 2. And what they're doing, they're taking input value, ABC Inc., and then our output value of USA 01. And really what it's going to do is allow you to go through and use these fields in order to set up your unique values to create that mapping, that crosswalk of your input-output values. And that'll allow you to then take this mapping and then utilize it for specific bank statements that you're having issues trying to reconcile some of the harder transactions that are coming through. So continue on. The system-defined code map through addenda is available to replace any addenda values that are defined in the code map. This results in a higher hit the wrong button. This results in a higher probability of reconciliation. So you're basically telling it what you want it to reconcile to. So you're saying, okay, this is what the value should be because that's the value that I'm seeing inside my system. And it basically allows you to, it's much more malleable, and it also inserts garbage or data that the bank is important to the bank in the addenda, but maybe not to you as a user or a business user when you're trying to do your reconciliation, because you have no idea what 15-digit code means that it has commas and forward slashes in. So this is kind of where you can use this as a part to reduce that, insert what you think should be in there in order to find your system transactions to match it up to. The image code mappings page is to replace the parse addenda value for your bank statement addenda values here. And you can see one more thing. You can see here as you can add additional mappings and naming. So you know 1, 2, 3 for your scroll levels, and then same down here. So you got ManytoOne. So you can do one mapping name, and then you could have 30 different values here, and then you're creating another mapping name, say Recon Ref ID 3, and then what its corresponding field value is below. So statement addenda transformation, the statement addenda transformation occurs through the online definition. Sorry, I'm having screen troubles here. Second. And so what the DIU provides is a horizontal navigation or a train stop that links the data source target output format along with the criteria. So PeopleSoft will provide the map definitions, and when they say PeopleSoft provides it, you'll provide the map definitions, and then PeopleSoft will then take those map definitions and translate them, crosswalk them to your input-output values for your daily bank statements. It copies the delivered map definitions and transforms the properties. And where to find that is in your setup financial supply chain common definitions. You can see the navigation there, map definition, which we saw previously. Your source target documents are different for each map definition and shows the delivery type of the statement and the corresponding documents or target documents that you're trying to map appropriately. So with the train stop, it guides you through these pages of map definitions, and really it's 6 steps. And first step is map, define a high-level map attribute and map scenario for what you're trying to reconcile. Step 2 is identifying its source. It'll identify the source data, where is our data coming from, and what tables and fields are we identifying. The target is to identify our target data structure and fields, where do we want to put the information. And then 4 is defining field-to-field mappings and data translations. Step 6 is defining the data filter criteria, step 5 is defining the data filter criteria, and step 6 is reviewing and submitting the map definition. And the summary it provides you with an overview of how the mapping uses to transform your targeted data in order to get the correct or the wanted output of your mapping. So here you can kind of see the layout and the steps which go through what they call, PeopleSoft is calling train stops, and stops at each one is how it's going to run through. So step one, define a high-level map attribute. In this case, we're looking at the prior day parse v2 version 1. We can set up a role, and you can see down here you're setting a basic role to initially set up your basic info and permissions, and allows only certain people to, because we're dealing with bank statements, it allows certain people to only run mapping for certain things, or at least have some sort of security or process in there to keep not anyone building these things to change the addenda data. Next is a source. So in the source, we're looking at our source types. So we're looking at the PS document and the database table. The package is coming from Bank Reconciliation. Our document we saw in the process flow is the bank statement parse, and version is version 1. Once that's done, you set up onto the next one, which is your target. Your target being that the where am I going to put the data, right? So logical type, same thing. PeopleSoft document with our database table, bank reconciliation. Now we're looking at the bank addenda table, and that's really where we're trying to put the information in order to run a reconciliation. So we went from grabbing the data that we mapped, and now we're trying to put it into our next step, which is our bank statement or bank addenda table. Next one is detail. And detail is really saying that, okay, now I'm going to look at my source field name, and let's say we have 01, it's bank statement parse, bank ID number, and it's basically setting you up to do what you want to do, where you want to transform, and how you want to change the values. In this case, we're not going to change the bank ID number. We're definitely not going to change the bank account number, but we're going to get down to the lower levels, which is descriptions. And that's really, if you can see at the bottom, the last description, 08, it's using a pattern, and it's using a fed ref with an ampersand, and it's going to use your parameters and continue on with, translating that data based on each level that you're going to add at your source field. So you can see that you can keep going a number of different, whether you're transforming your complex, extract, and pattern here, it'll keep you, allowing you to add additional rows in order to dial in your reconciliation process as far as mapping the addenda table. So next is the filter. This is where we can use expressions to then filter out information to allow us to, I guess, ignore certain sets of data or things that we don't want our expressions to, well, maybe hit or not hit. In this case, these are all equal to expressions, but you could do whatever condition type that you felt was necessary to bring in your to match your addenda data. So last is the summary and a kind of overview of each little page here. And the summary is you have your map definition, what version it is, your status, it's active, system, and public. Here's where our documents that we designed from the source to the target definition, and then our map detail. So it's just an overview if you were to come in here and look at exactly who did what and done to parse out the data, and it, you know, if there was just if you're having an issue, you could come in here and take a look at it without having to go through all the steps, and allow you to print this out and maybe go to someone and say, hey, this isn't the correct mapping. We need to go a different route. So bank addenda parsing. So below is an example of the query manager where it's displaying the deliver fields from the bank addenda table. You can kind of see when we were looking at what we were trying to confirm for the data, you had your bank account. It comes down to your reconciliation reference IDs, and that's where the number of your transformations or your mapping code take place, and you'll be able to fill those out. And I believe there's up to 10 spots at this point where you can create that Recon Ref ID and then create your mapping transformation. Here's an example from the query after it's been run. If you remember, sorry, it's kind of blurry because I had to stretch it, but you can see how in Bank ID it took that mapping and turned that value into FedRef. So basically taking what we said we wanted to transfer from a non-value to a FedRef value. And if you had something for each one, you would have a value for each one of these references, and allowing you to, when you run your Recon rules, to pick up one of those value, it could then be linked to an accounting template based on what values you're picking up, as we do today in Recon rules. So bank statement process, or parsing bank statement process flow. After the bank statement identity, parsing is set up and assigned the parse ID, and that's bank statement map ID. It will use and associate with one or more bank accounts. And so this is what I was talking about. You can take your map definitions and you can apply it by banks. So if you had 10 different banks and each one of those had just completely different mapping, you could basically come in here and set this up to hone in on particular banks, the entire accounts or maybe a few accounts, and allow yourself to be much more detailed in how you want to set up your parsing. And that allows the flexibility for you to not just say, okay, one rule, and in the old version, it's one rule and it applies to everything, and it's like, okay, well, this isn't going to work for this particular account all the time. So how do I manipulate this to make it work better for me? So this would allow you to kind of slice and dice up how you want to set up your map IDs. And this one here is just showing you the previous day setup. Next is the parse statement addenda, and that's just really just the Recon run control ID, and allows the user to, if you have access to run this parsing procedure pre-reconciliation. So if you're going to come in, you're going to run your parsing and then run your auto recon. And what it's doing is it's going through and picking out, similar to what we do with Recon, is you're identifying the external bank ID, bank account, and then type it is, and then you want to do it for. So nothing too new with this one. It's just an additional run control ID that was new to 18, but nothing's really changed in here as far as what you would need to run to process your bank statement process or parsing. So ManytoOne reconciliation rules, and so from reconciliation rules page, the bank recon rule, in transactions is set up to aggregate the criteria and the filter criteria for the transactions to do various one-to-one or many-to-one recon type can be assigned. So when you have the multiple statement lines summed up to match one or more transactions in the lines, by grouping these transactions by bank ID, account, statement ID, and value date, the grouping criteria can be then added as needed. Once your bank reconciliation is defined, newly added to create reconciliation SQL page, that run create SQL can then process the reconciliation rules to build the necessary information in the table as from the individual source to a specified rule within each source, and then this is run each time a new reconciliation rule with filter criteria is added, and the filter criteria would be modified. So anytime someone would change or update the criteria, it's going to rerun that and make sure that it picks up any additional changes that you may have made when creating the many-to-one reconciliation setup for your parsing the bank statement addenda information. So what does it kind of look like from a PeopleSoft level? This one happens to be one-to-one, and you can see the rule ID is here. It's ACH ref ID. And basically what we're looking at is how we're grouping these is bank account number, bank ID, the reconciliation bank date, reference ID, and so on. And then down here, and then you have your group transaction lines, which is account number, bank number, bank ID. So it's really kind of using this to translate what the statement lines are to the group lines. And then the match criteria. So now you have bank account number, bank ID, bank number, and this is basically telling it what you want to match off of based on your reconciliation information. And then it has a filter criteria down here that you could be using to help maybe exclude or include certain bits of information that you need to use to enhance your reconciliation process. So creating the SQL, very simple. It's just a run control ID where you're going to add, it's so weird, but you can add in your frequency, and then what are you running? Receivables with the deposits, and then it's going to run this, build that SQL to run it for your reconciliation process. So really just building that parsing data to then run it to build your parse data and then allow you to run your reconciliation. So this one is, oops, let me go backwards here. So creating your SQL page, run control ID. So you have your, this is a little bit better picture here. Your process frequency, and then your description, your AM deposits, and your reconciliation deposits here. And you can see as you can go through as many rows as you want to create Recon SQL. If you look up here, your bank reconciliation tab, external accounts you have, and then all of the rules that fall below here. And that's a reconciliation tab page, which everyone's pretty familiar with. So reconciliation tolerance page. Well, how does it? What do they do to enhance this? And if you see, if you're familiar with this, the reconciliation tolerance, you know that this is pretty much on steroids compared to what they were giving us before. You can see you can build your rule IDs, and then you can say, okay, day backward 1, day forward, your lower limit, and then so on. So you really can create more additional recon tolerance levels from the day level, and then the monetary level, which is the same thing. You know, you're creating additional rows in order to kind of hit what you want to do based on your rule ID of what you want to do with that particular transaction when you're doing your reconciliation. So it definitely allowed you to give you more flavor in order to go in and pinpoint activity that may be unique, or say it's a check from a certain vendor that always comes in at a weird time. And this would allow you to create a specific rule ID in order to get a better reconciliation rate hit. So bank account reconciliation rules page. This is where quite a bit of different has changed. You can see that you have your bank code and bank account. So we're going to apply that to the bank account. And this is really the new bank. This is the new bank reconciliation rules. And you can see here where it's starting to set up in similar fashion to the old version I showed you earlier. You have the sequence of what you want to do, and then your rule of what you want to reconcile. So in this case, it's a payment ID. You're using your tolerances in here, your amount tolerances, and then the accounting template that you would want that accounting to take place for the reconciliation. And so that's sequence number 10. And then you go to the next sequence, which is AP check references. So now you're looking at the same setup. Your sources payables, in this case the first one was Treasury. This one is now called payables, and you're basically kind of seeing how you're similar to the last one, but it's a little bit different on how you can break these out compared to this. You'd have to go in and modify, use development and help support to create these additional lines to get it to slice and dice it to this point. The next one, payables, same thing. You have your reference rules ID that you've created. You have your tolerances and so on. And you see down here you have direct debits. And really it's kind of setting up that same rule level. It's just allowing you to add a little bit more intricacies and a little bit more ability to target specific pieces of information. So next is the enhanced financial gateway security. So part of the release was enhancing financial gateway security, and in order to increase the security for bank reconciliation, the Treasury AP can now leverage the gateway security for reconciliation components and pages to limit access to the banking FG security and functionality that limits list prompt values and fields. So if someone wants to go in and look at gateway, they could have limited access, or at least the ability to see what's been paid and not paid without seeing information that may be sensitive or outside of their role or whatever they're doing. The next one is rules are assigned by the user ID or roles, and this is an attempt to use by when the user attempts bank IDs and accounts, only those accounts and bank account signed rules appear. So banking requires filter to bank out filters out the banks or accounts based on the requesting user and criteria. So it definitely gives ability to control someone from going in and having access to too much of the reconciliation process, or the ability to map or add codes or access financial gateway. So following components in the page have been updated, leveraging financial security. So in order to enhance this, you see the bank statement manager, enter bank statement, current day bank statement, the fee statements, references, and review bank statements. All the appropriate navigations are on the side. I'm sure everyone's pretty familiar with these areas. But they've all been impacted by the new security. From the page name and definition, we have reconciliation manager, process reconciliation, statement accounting, auto recon, semi, your manual, external transactions, scheduling, reversing, and book-to-bank statements. We have bank-to-book reconciliation, overriding the book-to-bank statuses, auto recon exceptions, transactions by account, and the manual account register report. So quite a significant impact from the security level. It really touches quite a bit of vast variety of areas within Gateway and within the PeopleSoft software from a page and table level. So what are the technical impacts based on the enhancements from PUM 18? And really the purpose of the section is going to be pretty heavy-handed in tables, but it is identify the people code and changes with PeopleSoft, image 7, and so it analyzes based on the high-level comparison of the instance. So the new components added to in image 18. So there's an AP scheduler, there's a parse, which we talked about, bank account reconciliation rules, what we went over, the bank account rule, bank recon rules, bank recon requests, and then we have tolerances, statement map IDs, the SQL ID that we run, the AP scheduler, the creation of SQL, and I guess we're in APs in there twice. And so next is updated components of the components that have been modified that were existing. The statement manager, the bank balance entry, bank statement accounting setup, your B2B overage, your B2B recon, and you have your database statement select. So bank recon, manuals, reversals, your imports, your requests, your business units, and your bank statement analysis. So number of other components that have been modified in order to incorporate the new reconciliation functionality. The updated from components following have been modified in 7, and this goes through quite a bit of stuff. And your bank statement validation, your charge component, statement activity, inquiry, your recon all, your 3 runs, FINS 303, 304, and TRC 450. Statement accounting type is a huge one, TR statement accounting, and then the unreconciliation, both unreconciliations was impacted as well. And then on the following components, updated components modified from the image, we have the sources that were impacted, our recon statuses, that 303, 304, and 450, our activity types, the statement accounting. I think this is the same one. Yeah, the same one, sorry. Parsing out, so the source status and target status that had changed, the bank recon process changed, and the target status is absent, the process bank statement has changed. Target status unchanged in the new PUM 18 release. So AE programs for bank recon, so these are new ones, new app engines. So we have AP, debits, credits, treasury, external, and then no changes. We have the B2B calculations, statement accounting, and then the AR bank statements. So really the impact came in the delivered treasury. When you check off all your boxes, you're going to see a little bit different setup in your recon when you're checking off your account setup. So new records, and I won't list all of these off, but just some of the more important ones is the additional parse record. You have bank addenda table, and it's an addenda work table. You also have these recon tables that are kind of set up for doing all of your mapping for you. Then you have the new rules, recon rules, your recon SQL ID generation, your tolerance amounts in your day. So that changed. That was added to incorporate those multiple scroll levels for your tolerances. And then you have your bank recon levels here. So when it's going to go through and start doing the mapping and go back to that recon table to compare your bank statement table to the recon table to do auto recon, that's really where these new tables come into effect. So continue on with new records, situation, most of the recon dependent. I won't go into detail. There are a couple statement mapping IDs that were included in that as well. And then you have, side of that, we have the IBAN that was also impacted. You have AP schedule IDs, and then again you have the whole app engine to do your auto recon from this side. Let's see, I think this is the last one, bank recon, and this is all related to the bank recon, auto recon, and also the individual rules that you're going to run and set up for your bank accounts. So field changes from PLUM 18. Some of these are kind of insignificant, but some of them are not. There's a new amount tolerance. There is a bank active limit check, and then there's some case sensitive, which is going to be a little bit different to help you dial in your recon matching rules. And then we have credit rate, currency, date tolerances. We have our, let's see, where's the other one in here? We have the descriptors that were added in there. Let's see, area descriptors, which was changed. And then we have the next line, this is our business units and categories, committee or companies, which were all three important ones that were impacted on the descriptors. And then we have our course, our country and components, and then our coverages, which is a little bit more deep into reconciliation values here. And then we have descriptor, we have the display name, display and display name, which were both impacted, and the descriptor text as well. Entry type, we have the feature, folder, and fund group. And then existing records with no changes, and so we have the parse rec, the addenda table, addenda work table, balance daily, recon filter, and so on. So there were some things that there was quite a few records that were not impacted, but quite a few that were. And you know, I took these lists from PeopleBooks, and I was kind of going through and crosswalking them. So they sometimes they say they changed, and then sometimes they said they changed, but and then they say they didn't change. So I wouldn't take this 100% Bible, but this is what they gave me as far as what the impact of the changes were. So configuration recap. I'm trying to see what we're doing on time here. Configuration recap, reconciliation setup pages, signing addenda parse ID, your bank recon tolerance, your reconciliation rules, your bank reconciliation SQL, your bank account recon rules, reconciliation records, reconciliation field aliases, reconciliation status codes, statement activity types, and your bank statement accounting. So from here, we have our assign addenda parse ID. This is our the actual page where you're sending, and when I showed you that add page where we're creating our map IDs, this is where we're assigning it to previous day. And then here's a current day example. Bank recon tolerance, and this is showed you earlier, and we're looking at creating a rule ID, and what do we want to do with that rule ID? We want to say 1 day back, 1 day forward, and then on the rule ID amount. So what do we want to do with that? We want to say low amount 1, high amount 1, and so it really isn't doing much for us because it's 1 and 1, but this is a recon rule you're setting up. You can also do percentage, which was not available in the last one, which is kind of cool, is you can do percentage based on your transactional values. So recon. So what are the delivered reconciliation rules that this is going to offer? So 1-to-1, one bank transaction to one system transaction, 1-to-many, one bank transaction to many transactions, many-to-one, more than one bank statement transaction to one system transaction, and then many-to-many, more than one bank statement transaction to more than one system transaction. And that's really what comes with the rules in the drop-down. So when you're going through it, it's going to show you those 4 selection criteria to then set up what type of account or reconciliation that you want to conduct based on your bank activity. So here are the recon rules. This is a 1-to-1 example, and you have your setup for your group statement and group transaction lines, and then your match criteria, what you're trying to match off in order to say, here's what my statement field alias will be, here's what transaction field will be. So here's your mapping process. Here's many-to-one, and looks very similar. It's not any different than your 1-to-one. It's just that you're going to have to identify the different nuances of what you're trying to capture. Now you're dealing with many more transactions to your one transaction. Many-to-many, same setup. You kind of have your rules alias here, and you're using your rule ID. That's one thing to note, is you're setting this up based on that rule ID that you set up. So all of the mapping and the parsing is being done, and this is really just saying, what do I want to do with my bank statement, and how do I look at the data, and how do I match it off? What am I going to use to say what I want equal to what outside of the actual parsing or mapping of the data. This is 1-to-many, same thing. It's never going to change in how it's set up. It's just going to be within your group transactions and your match criteria of how you do this. And this was delivered canned information, so it looks pretty similar in each one. And then let's see, was that 1-to-1? That's 1-to-many. 1-to-one. Again, we have this is the wire payment ID. And so basically you're setting up to look at gateway ID to reconciliation reference ID for the difference in this one. So creating a running SQL. This is your run control page. You're going to then look at that TR11 ACH page, and then this is what's going to run. You're going to run this in order to create that SQL to then run your reconciliation process from parsing your addenda data. So bank account recon rules, and you can see how it looks very similar to the old one, and it still gives you the basic layout and target balance of the original page that we had, and then goes through and says, okay, what's my recon process? What's my order in which I want to run these recon rules? And then what am I directing that towards? Reconciliation records. This is bank statement tables, bank statement, and that's really what's using as your record to store your bank statement lines during this process. Your reconciliation field aliases. In this case, for our bank statement table, we're looking at number, which is account, recon trans, amount, which is our amount, bank ID, and so on. So you can see how it's using a field name to the alias on the bank statement detail table. And then we have reconciliation status codes, which we're familiar with. It allows you to then update your recon status A short description, it'll allow you to create your recon codes that you would need to run your reconciliation process. Statement activity types, we're all familiar with this. Not a lot changed here. Identifying your statement activity type, identifying the description, short name, and then your transaction table and accounting template ID you would use for this particular fee. After running the process, you've created, say, an example of parse data we discussed. Not necessarily on Friday, I don't know why that's in there, but if you need more robust example, we would create a new map ID to try to populate 10 reference fields in the bank ID table. Creating the bank statement included addenda language would trigger a delivered assigned prior day addenda parse ID, your bank recon prior day map. So really what you're looking at is this is the, you have your statement code and your reference ID and then your Fed ref number 123 here. And that was, and then that was when we saw the map, or when I showed you the Fed ref number and then the @ symbol, and it had the taking in whatever amount of numbers it would take in for your addenda information. And then you have the link here for your parsed addenda. So what would it do is take that and break that addenda information out, and maybe you're going to key off one of these values in order to do your reconciliation process. So running the parse process. So here we go. So here's an example of the addenda parse. The addenda we parsed on Friday, if you need, I don't know why I keep saying that. Try to populate all 10 reference fields in the bank addenda to continue. So this is one where the we ran it and it had the Fed ref ID. So really what it's doing is our references of Fed ref ID. In that case we saw Fed ref ID 123. You're running that, it's parsing that out, and it's putting your bank account ID number, statement ID, sequence, and then inserting that Fed ref for the match value. So conclusion. We discussed the common issues with the pre-image 18 reconciliation. We covered new reconciliation functionality, and we identified how new functionality can fix some of the issues at the earlier recon versions that you're currently probably using that could be done to eliminate some of those hassles in order to make your reconciliation process much more fluid and more efficient. So I believe that brings us to questions. And I don't know how we're going to do the questions here. Is there a way to unmute Kate or Jordan?
He can just wrap it up.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we can unmute for questions. It doesn't have an unmute button on here.
I'm not sure if anybody can hear us here. It says we're unmuted, so I'm not sure what our issues are, but we'll be sending any questions that we've received that have not already been answered in a follow-up email along with the slide deck and the recording in case anybody would like to reference them later. But at this time, we are a few minutes over, so we apologize on that and appreciate everybody staying on. But we will, like I said, answer any of these additional questions that have been coming in a follow-up email to send out to all of the attendees. So we thank you again for your attendance today and hope you have a great rest of your day.